Welcome to Ecologic for the month of September. Great things going on. Thank goodness the 110-degree weather has passed us by. We had a beautiful time of the year. Uh, we have with us Jody Meche, who's been on before, and he's on the crawfish board. He's on the Shafly levy board, Mayor Pro Tem of the town of Henderson. He's former head of the Louisiana Crawfish Producers Association, LCPA West, and so he's very involved in fisheries, crawfishing, water quality, shrimping, you name it.
I was also on the Louisiana Crawfish Promotion and Research Board for almost 30 years. I guess I was appointed to that board, and I stepped down like a year ago. But I served on that board for a long time. We did a lot of good things on that board with the farmers and for the crawfish industry. So just to add that in there.
I just want to just say congratulations to some visitors we met in the basin, the 6 Mile Lake, a couple of days ago. The guy Sam Ken Knight and his sister Mady and his mother paddled a 19-foot canoe from the top of the Mississippi River, Lake Minnetonka in Minnesota, all the way to Burns Point down here with us. So just want to say congratulations. It took them about 3 months. Up in the upper end, they crashed their canoe with a rock and sunk, and fortunately they were only 30 miles from the manufacturer of the canoe, and he quickly repaired them. They were delayed about 10 days, and so they got back on the water and made the trip, and they really enjoyed the wilderness nature of coming down the Mississippi and the Shafly. In fact, they went 3 weeks without a Coke, and I heard that, and so when I met them, I had some Coke for them to enjoy, something cold. They had no ice water, there no place to get water, so to speak, so they had to purify the water from the river.
What did they do? They boil it or they just
No, they
filter it?
use a filter pump. That's quicker than boiling. You'd have to get out on the bank. You can't boil it in the canoe. So anyway, congratulations to those 3 pioneers who paddled the river like the Indians did hundreds of years ago. So Jody, tonight we want to talk about efforts that y'all, through your efforts and other volunteers, got a major fix on in the Henderson waterway. Henderson has gates that accept the flood. When the big flood comes down from Alexandria and Avoyelles Parish, we can empty it into Henderson. The problem is Henderson has these big spoil banks. They built pipelines and they didn't follow the requirements, the permits. They were supposed to backfill these canals that they put the pipelines in, and they didn't. So they left these levees, which are giant, the dams across the whole system.
Yeah, some areas, the spoil bank levees that were excavated when they dug the right of way to put the pipe across that 4-mile section of the basin in that area. Some of them are as high as about, I don't know, 14, 15 feet, if not higher,
Yep.
above natural ground. So it's a terrible damming effect for all of the water that flows across that area. For your potential flood waters, and also for your current that all of your fisheries rely on for
It
oxygenated
affects
water.
crawfishing, sport fishing, catfishing, commercial fishing, crawfishing, all that's affected by these dams that cause this stagnant water, lack of flow.
And historically, the area was a natural reservoir for your floodwaters. You know, when you get major rainfall, it was a low area in Louisiana that all of your runoff would fill. And because it's been blocked off with levees and dams and you name it, you don't get to utilize that natural reservoir for all of your flooding
Right.
periods. You know, whenever you have high rainfall.
The Dixie
heavy rainfall.
Pipeline, it's called the Dixie Pipeline, it's been there since the middle 60s. And right next to it is the power line, big power lines across the basin, and I guess they had to drive trucks across the basin to build it. So they built a little levee all across it.
And what also happened there, Mr. Harold, is what I can understand by seeing what happened is when they cleared that right of way, they cleared all of those trees to put that power line right of way in there.
Yeah.
It acted as a channel, and what happened is it captured the flow of water. When you had heavy flows flowing through there from, from your rain events, and that water was flowing through there, that water would turn and channel through that right of way, and then when it would turn and channel through that right of way, the sediment would drop out, and it elevated and kind of levied that whole entire right of way and dam the natural sloughs and the natural tributaries that are historic in that area. So what you have is your north side of your sloughs, when they flow the water through, it gets the dam at the high power line. So what would need to happen is we need to reconnect the north side, the sloughs on the north side of the power lines with its southern counterpart by trenching underneath the power line the same depth as the natural sloughs are, and you would restore that flow through those natural tributaries.
The natural tributaries are so important because
Restore it.
to restore the natural tributary, that's a whole ecosystem by itself that doesn't exist with a canal. A canal is a ecologic dead zone, but the natural waterways that has curves, and the movement of the water in the curves cause a spiraling motion in the water and brings the oxygen-rich surface water to the bottom, where the clams and grubs and all of that live. The food chain of life begins there. So reestablishing the natural flows of the coulees and bayous is critical to the ecological revival of the swamp.
What happened in the Dixie pipeline area is when this pipeline was trenched and laid across that area, and they left these elevated spall banks, they didn't leave the amount of cuts and gaps that they were that the specs said they were supposed to leave. All of the original permits, if you read the permits, they weren't supposed to block navigation, and they weren't supposed to block the natural hydrology of an area. And everywhere they left these spall banks elevated in a continuous fashion, it serves as a dam across the whole waterway. And the whole area becomes a waterway when you get your annual flood, period. You call it flood, but it's natural high water every year that we get. But what happened is they left it dammed off, and we've been trying to open this up for decades. And we started working with Teche Vermilion, Mr. Harold, Mr. Dave Dixon, the neighboring parishes who would all potentially benefit from such a project. And originally I had proposed I wanted the spall bank completely leveled or removed, and we couldn't get that done, but we accomplished them agreeing to go in and open 25 cuts and gaps on both sides of the right of way, in the north spall bank and the south spall bank. So the 25 gaps are combined on both sides of the right of way. But over the past 5-6 decades, the water had to bottleneck. When it would come from the north and come in the northern part of the Henderson area, it would bottleneck through an area what we call Fusilier or Bayou Fourdoche. Well, now since these 25 gaps have been completed and they're dug, now you're going to have a tremendous sheet flow that is going to be able to occur across that whole 4-mile stretch of pipeline, which it won't have to bottleneck anymore through only 2 openings. You're going to have 25 cuts and gaps that when your water rises, you're going to have a good flow of water across the whole area, which is going to enable you to pass your flood time water when you're having heavy rainfall and you have a lot of water that could potentially flood people. It's going to enable you to pass that water more efficiently, and it's going to give you a much better current flow, which all of the fisheries and the whole ecosystem is going to benefit from the birds, the ducks, the otters, alligators, everything that lives in that ecosystem is going to benefit now, because you're not going to have dead, stagnant areas of water. You're going to have a good sheet flow of water across this whole 4-mile stretch of the Henderson swamp area. So it's going to be an unbelievable project that is going to be a win-win for everybody. For us to be able to protect us better from floods, for us to be able to catch some bigger and better fish, for us to be able to catch more crawfish. I mean, it's going to be a win-win for everybody.
And that's an important point, that a lot of these flood control projects also have great benefits for water quality, fisheries enhancement, all that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was a fairly inexpensive project. I mean, when the contractor got out there, they started with 2 amphibious track hole machines. One had a chipper head on it. It traveled the right of way and got on top of the spall bank, and it chipped everything that was in that area where they were gonna dig the gap out. Just chipped all of the brush and the trees out of the way. And then this other trackhoe came with this nice sized bucket, and it actually dug some 50-foot wide gaps and smoothed them out real good. Dug the gaps to an equal depth of natural ground. So the gaps are maybe even slightly deeper than the natural swamp floor, which the whole area should be that way, but that's what we left with from the installation of that pipeline. But two machines did almost completed, but it completed about 19 cuts. And then they accidentally, the pipe that was in the right of way came up and it wasn't buried by 4 feet of cover like it was supposed to be. And one of the tracks of the machine struck the pipe, ruptured the pipe, caused about a 2-week disruption, I guess. And then they got more equipment in, but they finally completed the 25 gaps. So it was a fairly inexpensive project.
And it's been so important that volunteers pushing real hard, and it got Quipper involved. It's funded by the Coastal Restoration Program and the Crawfisherman Basin Program. So it's a win-win, and there are other projects that we'd like to see done in the area to build a gate to dump this flood actually into the Crawfisherman River into Old Bayagatabla.
Yeah.
That'd be the second project that would make a hell of a difference, both for fisheries, water quality, and flood control.
Right.
So important, but that's a real success, so it's real important.
That's one phase of 4 that we proposed. Our group, Teche Vermilion, members of the Henderson community, mayor, myself, members of St. Martin Parish government, members of St. Landry Parish government, Lafayette Parish government, numerous agencies and people were involved in putting our heads together and coming up with 4 phases of proposal to improve passing our flood times when we have high levels of rainfall, or when we got to pass high levels of water, and also improve the water quality across this area. So hopefully it's the start of getting some of these other phases done also.
And our best opportunity to improve flood is to use natural retention. But you can't use natural retention if it's all dammed off. And
Exactly.
so that's a very important. We had this been in place, one estimate showed it would have lowered the Lafayette flood waters to almost 1 to 2 feet. Well, that's important because 75% of the homes had less than a foot of water in it.
2016 you're talking about?
Yeah,
right?
2016. So had this been in place, you'd probably have saved 3,000 or 4,000 homes from flooding, and all the money and all the harassment involved in flooding those homes.
Since this project has been in construction, the different officials from CPRA and whoever, the contractors, they've come, and I've taken them in my boat and took them and toured the area, and I explained them how the water works across that area. I've been out there all of my life, especially the Mayor Colette of Henderson. He's been fishing in that place for 40 years or more, and so we have a real good understanding of how the water works in that area. So I took them from there, and we also went up to where the high power lines are located, which is several miles north of the Dixie pipeline area. And as we went through the Grimmie Canal and came into Bayou Fourdoche, they asked me how deep, Mr. Dave Dixon with Teche Vermilion, he said, Jody, how deep is it right there? And I took my paddle, I'm in my boat, and we're at pool stage right now in the area, but I stuck my paddle down into the water on the side of my boat, higher than my elbow, about in between my elbow and my shoulder, and I couldn't make my paddle touch the bottom of the depth of where the Grimmie comes into Bayou Fourdoche. And then when we got to the high power line right away, same bayou, at the high power line right away, I got out of my boat. My boat was sanded, it was grounded. I couldn't drag my boat through with the people I had in my boat. But I got out of my boat with my little short boots where the water was maybe right about barely up to my ankle deep with my little short boots. So
6 inches.
the bayou, about 6 inches of water, 3 to 6 inches of water. So the bayou is completely filled in at the crossing of the high power line right away. And south of that, for at least a quarter-mile stretch, it was shallow the whole way. I had to keep my motor jacked up all of the way and also trimmed up so my prop could actually turn in water, and it wasn't in the debris that was in the bottom of the bayou. So it's really filling in, and all of the natural tributaries from there back toward the west guide levee are completely filled in. So some work would need to be done there, and it's also another part of a project that could be done fairly inexpensively, and it would improve our ability to pass these flood times. You know, whenever we have these high levels of rainfall and we need to pass this water, it would improve our ability to be able to pass the water, and it would make the water quality unbelievably better flowing across that area.
Yep, a real victory. Something else wanted to talk about was the White Lake system. That's an impoundment that covers about 1,000 square miles. The idea is to keep it fresh, and of course, with no rain and high evaporation, the lake is going down, 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 and all the marsh surrounding White Lake is dry. Duck hunting is going to be real tough early in the season unless we get some water. It's so dry that you could walk from Pecan Island to the lake, which is about 2 miles, with your Sunday shoes and not get bottom wet. I mean, it is. A friend of mine has duck blinds south of the island, and he and his buddy with a helicopter landed in his pond, and he could walk all around the pond. You know, it's just solid as concrete, and that whole marsh system is dry. We're seeing something that hadn't probably occurred in the last 50 or 60 years.
And the whole idea of having all of the dam structures, you know, in that area is to try to keep that water as fresh as possible, because your farmers utilize that water for pumping their rice fields, for pumping their crawfish ponds, and when it's so dry, we're in such a drought situation like we're in now, and you have so much of an inflow of salt water because of the tidal. The tidal impact is going to have a much greater impact when your water is so low.
With that real low, the salinity in the lake and in the coastal has gotten real high, where they can't pump for second crop rice. The price of rice is real high. A lot of those farmers don't want to make a second crop, and they can't. And of course, they can't pump for crawfish.
Right.
Which they should be doing.
You can't pump salt water
You can't pump salt water for
crawfish.
crawfish. So that may mean that, you know, the crawfish ponds up in Acadia and Avoyelles and St. Landry may be able to really help provide some crawfish for the marsh. But if half of the acreage of crawfish ponds, and I would guess half the acreage in Vermilion, Jeff Davis, Calcasieu, Cameron, North Cameron are affected by this. So you probably have 30 or 40% of all the crawfish acreage we won't be able to operate because of saltwater intrusion and saltwater that's made its way around these locks. So the price of crawfish will be very high.
Yeah, you'll probably have a minimal supply in your early part of your season, so the price is going to be really high. When you have a real low supply of crawfish, or a real minimal supply of crawfish, the price is a lot higher. And when you have a lot of crawfish on the market, you have a surplus coming in or a bumper crop coming in, your prices go down to where they're a little more affordable. But I suspect, because of this drought period that they're going to have to suffer, that crawfish are going to be scarce probably in our early parts of the crawfish season. And you never know, things can change pretty quick, but
yeah, hurricane come through can change it.
It's time now that they have that water to be able to start pumping those rice fields and those crawfish ponds, because they usually like to start pumping around the October, November period, and they're gonna suffer some setback, I know. But that's one thing about our farmers, and I'm all about supporting our farmers. Our farmers get a lot of they get subsidized, when they have a lot of impact from nature or from drought or from freezing temperatures or for hurricanes or whatever, they get subsidized, and they get kind of compensated for their losses, and they need to be taken care of, and I just wish all of our commercial fisheries could get the same treatment, because, I want to talk about that a little bit, like the commercial crawfish industry. It all started with wild crawfish being caught in the Teche Basin. That's how the crawfish industry started in Louisiana. Crawfish used to be kind of like alligators used to be. People were ashamed to eat crawfish. Like alligator, you used to have to throw alligator.
Right.
You used to have to throw alligator meat away. Nobody wanted to eat it. Now, Alligator meat is sold for $11 a pound. You can't produce enough alligator meat for the demand of alligator meat, and crawfish is sold all over the world. But it all started with wild Cajun crawfishermen in the Atchafalaya Basin. And let me tell you the importance of wild Cajun crawfishermen to our economy and to our state. People want to come and they want to experience our Cajun culture and the whole idea of the Cajun way of life. And that's where it all started, you know. And listen, when I as a commercial crawfisherman, that's what I do for a living. I'm an elected official, but I make minimum money. I take more money out of my pocket for my involvement in public service than I put in. I can guarantee you that. I make my money commercial crawfishing and commercial fishing. But when I put, let's say, 1,000 pounds of crawfish in my boat at $1.50 a pound, which is $1,500, I have several $100s of bait and expense that comes out of that. But Mr. Harold said it, and I pretty much figured it out. He's about dead on. You can take that $1,500 of crawfish that I sell, and by the time it's consumed, you can multiply it in the economy by about 10 to 12 times. You can imagine. It exchanges hands 2 or 3 times. By the time it's finally boiled and eaten, it's $6, $7 a pound, $7.50 a pound or more. All of your drinks, your beer, everything that goes along with the festiveness of crawfish, you know, is added into that. That's all added in value. So we're creating economy and we're creating business for Louisiana.
You're at the foundation of the economy.
So we're super important. And another thing I want to educate everybody about the wild crawfishermen. If the farmers could not buy our wild crawfish to seed stock their acreage, the crawfish industry would cease to exist if there would be no wild production. You can't just go levee off an area of dirt and pump water in it and plan to catch crawfish. You have to stock that pond or that crawfish farm with wild seed. And it comes from guys like me who fish wild crawfish in the Atchafalaya Basin. So we're of super importance to this state and to the economy and to the crawfish industry, but we can't ever get any help. When COVID hit, the commercial fishermen couldn't get any kind of subsidy or help. I've been over backwards to try to get our congressional delegation to help us. Oh yeah, Wildlife and Fisheries has money for y'all. Wildlife and Fisheries didn't help us. Our market suffered the same as every other market. Crawfish is crawfish. When you eat them, you don't know if you're eating wild or farm. Crawfish is great for Louisiana no matter where it comes from. And we should get some help like everybody else. I just wanted to throw that in there.
So, but the price of crawfish is relatively high because of the drought conditions. This drought is probably the worst we've had in 70, 80 years.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
I remember when we were in high school, we were hunting alligators, and we had a drought like this, and all that marsh, barn, pecan islands there, of course, all dried up. And it must have been like 54, 55, something like that. And all the canals that had water in them, the pipeline canals, water were full of frogs. Mm-hmm. And we could, you know, we'd catch 200 or 300 frogs, fill 2 or 3 ice chests full of frogs, and we could get $1 a frog, which in those days when a gallon of gasoline was 20 cents, $1 went a long way. I remember a poor boy at Don's was $1.25, and a movie was 25 cents. So with $5, you could go to a movie and have a date. You know, $5 right now won't buy a poor boy anywhere.
Right. And the one thing about the dry condition in the basin, you know, the basin, it should dry out, you know, to an extent every year, because what happens is when those bottoms dry out, it's like a healing process happens. That old mucky, soft bottom hardens. And like Mr. Harold talks about it all the time, those seeds that are in that soil can stay dormant for years, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Well, when it dries out, those seeds that are in there germinate and they grow all different types of vegetation that are good for all of the fisheries. So when you get your water rise again from your rivers and your rain and everything, yeah, you have vegetation that feeds the animals, that feeds the fisheries, that feeds the crawfish. And those crawfish, they're gonna burrow down until they get down into that groundwater, and they're gonna remain there until that next high water season happens. And you know, we could get it by rainfall, and then we also can get it by rain and snow melt up and down the Mississippi River tributary.
And the low water solidifies the bottom, which accommodates fish laying eggs. The eggs survive. They don't survive in the bottom, so that drying out is a natural process. That's very, very important to the whole ecosystem. That means of bounty in years to come.
Right.
The, nature is a remarkable thing, you know.
You have to take every season, you know, how it comes. And I mean, I know what a lot of fishermen do. I know what I do is I just keep a prayer in my heart, you know, that God's gonna give me what I need, and it usually always works out. Sometimes we go through a few bad times, and we appreciate the good times, I think, you know. And you do like that squirrel. When you have a lot of nuts to harvest, you save some up for the time that you don't have any, so you gotta save a little bit up. Yeah.
So hopefully, you know, we don't want a hurricane, but a big wet, this tropical storm would, you know, change things a lot.
Yeah, we could sure stand a few good cool fronts to clash with that hot air that we've been having, and that would make some good heavy rainfall to where it might start filling up those tributaries again and giving us a good fresh source of water in our bayous
Yeah,
and in our natural areas.
with this dry marsh and that whole White Lake system, it's gonna be a tough season for ducks.
We got to try not to pray for rain, Mr. Howard. Remember
yeah.
that year
Yeah,
they
right.
told Governor Foster, they said, Governor Foster, we were in a drought period when Mike Foster was governor, and he started advising that everybody pray for rain, and he was praying for rain, and man, when the rain started coming, everybody was, Governor Foster, please don't pray for no more rain. We had more rain than we knew what to do with, so you got to be careful. I think you got to take it like it comes.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful time of the year, though. The fishing should be improving, and saltwater, freshwater fishing is real tough right now. I think you can't really get around the basin, it's so low.
No, but your cooler temperatures is gonna make your water quality better, and then I think your fish are gonna
It is,
wanna,
right.
they're gonna wanna feed, and they're gonna probably start biting a little better, you know, when these temperatures start cooling off. Cooler temperatures make your water quality better. That hot sun is not always just cooking on it and making it real, stagnant and evaporating it to such low stages, you know, the cooler temperatures make it a little better.
Yeah, for sure, yeah, very, very. So the prospect, if you can't get crawfish, you're gonna probably sell them at a real good price.
Yeah, and then when you can get them, appreciate them, because, you know, it's something
And
that,
another thing that's hurting is the price of rice is very high, so a lot of the areas in the Boyles and St. Landry Parish where they would plant one crop of rice, and then they'd flood it for crawfish after the first rice crop. And they're not doing it for crawfish, they flood it for rice,
yeah.
because the price of rice is sky high. For whatever, India is not exporting rice, and they export 40% of the world's needs for rice. So that's put a situation where somebody's gonna do without, and when that happens, the economy pushes the price out of sight. And so that's gonna affect the crawfish too.
Yeah.
I looked at, but I was hunting teal, therefore yesterday, and these were crawfish ponds that they are now making a second crop of rice.
That's what you were hunting?
Yeah, we're hunting rice the other day. We didn't do very good, there wasn't very many ducks, so.
Yeah.
So we are real fortunate that, we have, it's hard to tell how this drought is gonna affect, you know, the upcoming season. I would think, how we manage a place like White Lake has to be looked at. You know, the locks and levees hold that whole, it closes it to shrimping. And how shrimp are getting in is amazing. That there are shrimp in White Lake right now.
Yeah.
And so, but the rice farmers are really hurting. They should be making a second crop. But the intercoastal and that whole White Lake Grand Lake is so salty, they cannot pump it. And they can't pump it for crawfish either.
Talk about the Teche Vermilion pumping station, you know. That was one of the reasons why it was established, was to try to keep plenty of fresh water in the Vermilion River system, you know. And that's why you need fresh water in the system. It's to pump all of the different agriculture and aquaculture that is happening all along there, and other reasons also. But we're looking at other possibilities to do projects, Mr. Harold, like in the area of the Catawba structure, where Bayou Ami is, and there is like a cover. It is a culvert. It's a culvert with a valve in it. It's pretty much what it is. And I guess it's what, about a
Little
30 or
pipe.
36 inch pipe? I don't know if it's even 36 inches, Mr. Harold?
That's what it is, two by two, I think it's a.
And it's got a valve in it, and you can regulate it, you know, to where you don't have to allow any water to come from the Teche Vermilion side, where the water's coming in from the Teche Vermilion pumping
Real
station
high.
and going into the Vermilion and the Bayou Teche. But we would need a set of gates there, and not to allow a lot of water all of the time, but to allow some fresh water to flow into that system sometimes, because our taxpayers in St. Martin Parish put money into that system, the same as Lafayette Parish and Vermilion Parish and everyone else into the Teche Vermilion pumping
Right now,
station.
I would think the water in Lake Falls Point, Dauterive, and Bayou Army is getting salty, pretty green.
And we could benefit from a substantial amount of fresh water being diverted into there through a set of gates. Now, when you have potential flood times, when you have a lot of rainfall, well, then you could shut those gates off and make sure that you don't put too much water into the system to flood anyone. You know, you have gauging stations at all of the different communities to make sure you know just about how much water you can deal with, so you don't flood a bunch of people. But the system could work in two ways. It could protect you from flooding, but it also could provide you plenty of fresh water, because we have a lot of aquaculture and agriculture that goes, you know, that happens all along that system. You know, the Bayou Ami goes into Catahoula Lake, down into Lake Dauterive and into Lake Falls Point, and then on down out through the Jaws and everything. And we could benefit from fresh water in that system. You know, we have the sugar mill
Yeah.
runoff.
Yeah,
It
that's
runs
right.
off into Catahoula Lake. It creates you know, dead water in some periods of time, and you have sewage water that runs off. So by allowing more fresh water to flow through that system, you would alleviate and remedy some of those problems. You know, that's what we're not going to eliminate all of the pollution that hits our fresh water and our tributaries, but the solution is dilution. The more
Right.
fresh water you have in the
Get the
area,
flow,
the
get
more
the
you
flow.
eliminate or minimize your
It'd be
pollution.
great if you had the gate at Catawba at Cross Springs on the river itself. You'd have water into Anderson, but you could put an outlet somewhere around McGee's Landing and let it right into Bayou Ami, that gives you fresh water in the whole
Correct.
system. And it's just restoring what was there originally.
Now, right now, Mr. Harrell, if you go to where the Catawba structure is, and you stand up in between where the Teche Vermilion water comes into Bayou Teche and the Vermilion River, and Bayou Ami, you can stand up in between there. There's a road and a dam across there with that culvert. The difference from one side to the other, I bet you, is 15 to 20 feet.
Oh, yeah, it is.
From the Bayou Ami side to the Teche Vermilion upcurrent side,
Yeah.
I bet you there's about a 15 to 20 foot difference.
Well, Bayou Ami would be at tide level, 2 or 3 feet,
Yeah.
and then the lake by Catawba is gonna be at 18.
So
That's why they keep it, they pump it at 18.
So at your low water time periods, you could allow some fresh water flowing through that system
So
to
the
make
whole-
that system a lot fresher and improve that whole
That
area.
would benefit people in St. Landry, St. Martin, Iberia, and St. Mary.
Yeah, and that's being looked at right now.
Yeah.
We're looking at probably, you know, making it happen and about getting funding to make that happen. So there's a lot of things that have come up from us starting with our little four phase project proposal, Dixie Pipeline and all
The
of that.
important thing in this is that people have, I mean, it's our tax dollars, and our public officials have to respond to these needs and respond to citizens who know what's going on and know what would be best to benefit a lot of people for a lot of reasons.
Right.
It's not just flood control, it's water quality, fisheries, all of that's a part of it. They're all
Exactly.
tied together.
You know, man has altered the natural systems, you know, for flood protection or for whatever reasons. And when they did it, you know, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, they didn't consider the ramifications for what they were doing back then. And now we're suffering from those ramifications. And it should be a no-brainer, you know, to go back and modify those systems and improve them and learn from where we've gone wrong and improve it for the benefit of everybody, for the benefit of flood protection and for the benefit of good water quality for our ecosystems, you know, that we depend on, that Louisiana is known for.
Right.
Yeah.
The University of Florida, there was Dr. Ben Christensen, who worked with us on shell dredging. is a world prominent hydrologist. And I asked him, when you teach people about hydrology, what's your method of teaching? Well, he said, we use the case method just like management. And I said, where do your cases come from? He said, oh, they're all from Louisiana. Y'all have had a century of doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Right, building levees. And you can go to Rockefeller Reserve, they're building these giant levees. And they're not dredging the canals to raise the levees, they're dredging new canals in the marsh. So it's total destruction of marsh. It's phenomenal, what's happening out there.
Yeah.
You know, for thousands of years, there wasn't one levee out there, and we think we're gonna improve it by putting levees, and
Right.
putting these giant levees.
And you know, Mr. Harold, it's sad, and I don't want to get on it too much, but it's a small group of people. It's a small group of wealthy interests who control these projects to where these projects that are not as beneficial for the environment get implemented and get built to the tune of multi-million-dollar projects.
Sure.
And good common sense projects that are a lot less costly don't get done because they don't benefit that small group of wealthy interests that runs the state of Louisiana.
Look
It's
at
sad.
the Jaws is the outlet for all our flood water from Alexandria on down. That's the main outlet into Côte Blanche Bay. It's closed. It's also the outlet for water coming down from the whiskey, from the Chafly River and
Wax Lake
Wax
outlet.
Lake outlet. That's all roaring down there in the coastal. You can't get out
Right.
because the jaws are closed. The main outlet is closed. That's about a $2 million project to fix it. It's nothing. We're spending $3 billion building a diversion down by Myrtle Grove on the Mississippi.
3 billion with a
3
B.
billion with a B. We can't find 2 million, but you know, the federal agencies and engineering firms, they don't want to fool with a $2 million project. They'd rather fool with a $50 million project. I mean, we did one in Vermilion Parish, right by Schoonerby. We restored 300-acre pond back to marsh. Well, that only lasted 2 years. But we spent $38 million to restore 300-acre lake. That's unbelievable. We spend that time. And then to do it, we dredged holes in the bay. Big, deep holes that destroyed the bottom of the bay. You know, the bottom of the bay is just as valuable as the marsh. But if you dredge a canal, you make a big hole in it, it'll never produce crabs, never produce anything.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just phenomenal how I was on the water yesterday and showing these people that from Minnesota, the bulkheads on the north side of Côte Blanche Bay, the bulkheads were put there 5 years ago, and they were put right on the edge of the beach. Well, now the beach is 1,000 yards from the bulkhead.
Yeah.
The bulk is all washed and broken. You know, they a hazard to navigation. There's no lights on or anything, and they're 1,000 feet from the shore.
Mhm.
At high tide, when the high tide puts 2-3 inches of water over it, it's a big hazard for people who are not knowledgeable of what's under that water, you know. So, coastal restoration, you got to give them credit for trying, but a lot of the things they're doing really is a big mistake. And the dams, for instance, you got 40 dams on Marsh Island. Well, those dams were real expensive, and they when oil money started coming, that's when they started building them. But each dam closed off thousands of acres of marsh, where the shrimp can't jump the dam. You know, juvenile trout or redfish can't jump the dam. They can't, you know, juvenile stages, they have to get into the marsh to survive. They can't get in. And then the flood water can't come into it. And when you impound a wetland, you kill all the wetland plants.
Right.
And it's only the plants that hold the marsh together. So if you kill all the plants, the marsh all goes to the lake.
Right.
You know, it's no longer a wetland.
It all turned into open water.
And they not only did they, on the southwest side of Marsh Island, they built a giant levee that's 7-8 miles, about 3 miles wide. And this was high ground where cattle graze. Now they've turned it all into a big lake. I mean, they impounded that water, and turned the cattle grazing area, the only high ground on Marsh Island, they levied it in and destroyed it. It's just phenomenal how these things happen, but, how would, you know, who makes the decisions, I don't know, no, if they're making the wrong decisions. Like the White Lake, Grand Lake system, why we have no tarpon. You know, the tarpon spawn and produce their young way up in the rivers. But a place like White Lake, all the rivers are closed.
Right.
The Mermentau, Lacassine, Nepique, Blackman Brule, all these were spawning grounds for tarpon, but the gates are closed. They can't come in and they can't survive in them. So, at some point, and whether if we could restore the access that the tarpon need to get to areas like by Long and by Pigeon. When I was growing up and fishing there were thousands of tarpon spawning in there, and it was just amazing to see.
Yeah.
But when they dredged the super channel, they closed all the bayous, and another environmental disaster. The basin was a paradise,
Yeah.
fishing paradise.
It is filled in. I mean, the basin is
And
it
that
is
or
almost completely
they-
filled in compared
well,
to back in those days.
They
You know,
pumped
Mr.
it.
Harold?
A
Yeah.
lot of it was pumping it.
Exactly.
You had 28 of the world's biggest dredgers operating 4 years, and they were operating 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And there was hydraulic spoil, and they were just dumping it. They fill in the side channels, they filled in screw boat chute, the crevasse, they filled in the Grand River. The Grand was bigger than the Chaffelin. They totally filled it in. Where your parents grew up along the
Oh,
Grand,
exactly.
that's where y'all
They
grew
had
up.
to move out of the basin because they couldn't have navigable access to civilization anymore, so they had to move out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the Grand, over there by, Collin Lake and Lake Rockhead, that
Oh.
was like 80, 90 feet deep.
Yeah.
And they filled it up to 30 or 35 feet above sea level.
Yeah. It's all a hill now.
It's all a big hill.
It's not a grand river anymore. It's a grand hill.
And then the landowners, they claim it as accretion, which accretion is not at the back end of a dredge. It's slow and natural change, imperceptible over
Imperceptible
time.
over time. And you know, Mr. Harold, I'm glad you mentioned them. You call them landowners, and I learned from you to call them water bottom claimants.
Yeah.
You know, people own land, and I respect landowner rights. I expect the land, you know, the land that people own, and I don't want to go onto that land. But areas where you can navigate a boat and you can participate in commerce, you can catch fish, you can catch crawfish,
Subject
you
to title to
you
change.
can transport your cargo or transport passengers, subject to title exchange, have an ordinary high water mark that you know, these areas are inundated with water, some 8, 10 months out of the year, sometimes 11, 12 months out of the year. These landowners, like Mr. Harold call them, I call them water bottom claimants, they are the main roadblock from getting good common sense projects done to improve the state of Louisiana as far as protecting us from flooding and as far as improving our ecosystems. They are the main roadblock because they're only in favor of projects that benefit their ultimate plan.
Yeah.
And every time we have a good project that we want constructed or we want done, if it's not to benefit them or if they feel it's gonna allow people to come on what they call their land by boat, to be able, you know, where you can go and fish and navigate, they're not in favor of those projects. We've been fighting them for 30 years. They're the main roadblock on stopping us from getting good projects done in Louisiana, and I can promise you that.
Yeah, and the big swampland, marshland owners pay very little tax. They pay some tax, but it's very small.
Yeah, their property, their land is assessed as worthless swamplands or
Right,
you know,
that's what's for swampland.
and they
too.
pay hardly any taxes on it,
One,
but
one landowner in Vermilion Parish with 27,000 acres, their taxes in '22 was $2,000.
and the majority of them are out-of-state corporations that are not even from Louisiana, and they have collected the riches and the wealth of the state of Louisiana for 100 years or more.
Yep.
From the oil and gas, from the trees, I mean, you name it, everything. The politicians were in place and were in on the take 80, 100 years ago, and it was all water bottoms that should belong to the state. Lakes, bays, and water bottoms up to the ordinary high water marks acceptable to commerce belongs to the state of Louisiana. It's not private property that somebody should be able to own and collect all of the wealth of our state and put it in their private corporations' pockets.
It's called sovereignty lands.
Yeah.
Land subject to navigation, to commerce, the water subject to commerce, navigation, and title exchange all belong to the state, and it was given to the state when it became a state, and they could never be sold.
Yeah.
But in spite of that, they did sell it.
Well, I've been fighting that for almost 30 years now with the help of Mr. Harrell. Mr. Harrell educated us about what had happened in history, and he taught us how to fight. And every case that I've been involved in that we've gone to federal court, we've won. You know, we've proved that it was susceptible to be used in commerce. It was the waters of the U.S., and the courts agreed, and the courts ruled in our favor. Mr. Harrell's son, when he got out of law school, Mr. Harrell used to tell us, "You wait till Gordon gets out of law school," he said, "we're gonna show those bastards." And Gordon wrote many, excuse my voice, I'm losing my voice. Gordon wrote many briefs, unbelievable, well-written briefs that helped us to win some of our cases and helped our
Yeah.
fight. We're still in that basin. I mean, we don't have a productive basin like we used to have and what we're familiar with from when we were younger, but we're still out there and we're still participating in commerce and providing for our
In spite
families.
of all the setbacks, it's still very, very
Exactly.
productive.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a beautiful place, and right now the water's just crystal clear, and they have a beautiful sand beaches down by American Pass where every weekend there must be 1,000 people enjoying
Yeah.
those sand beaches and the beautiful clear. The water's crystal clear right now. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a real treasure. We hope to, some of the things that need to be done, all deals with water quality and coastal erosion program. When you look at why is all this marsh washing away, and you can look at it over time, geology is not 50, 100 years, it's thousands of years. And LSU Geology Department did a study in the 60s about the Gulf of Mexico, how much deposition, how much soil has been disposed of, landed in the Gulf of Mexico in 30,000 years. Average across the Gulf of Mexico is about 30 feet in 30,000 years. Louisiana's coastal zone in that 30,000 period is 670 feet. That's 2.5 feet per century, because the rivers of the nation between the Alleghenies and the Rockies all drain to us. It all drains totally to us, and we've dammed all that off. The Missouri is dammed from one end to the other.
I think that's the only way we'll ever get the right things done as far as what we need done in Louisiana to help our situation as far as protecting us from flooding and help out all of our ecosystems and our wonderful fishing paradise that we've had. Try to get it back, to what it used to be. We have to include the whole country, especially up and down along the Mississippi River, all of its tributaries, and make them understand that their flood protection depends upon what's happening in Louisiana, what's happening to us. And when you're gonna get the whole midsection of the country and all of those who are benefiting from that water coming into our state, into our basin, into our bayous, then we may be able to get some congressional clout and have the right things done. But it's too
The Missouri, for instance,
controlled by just officials from Louisiana.
Missouri River is about 50 miles longer than the Mississippi, and it's totally dammed. One dam that we visited a couple of months ago, right on the border of Canada and up in Montana, the dam is 550 feet high. From the dam to the top of the lake is 189 miles. There's about 20 rivers in that 189 miles. That's all dammed too.
Right.
I mean, they flooded, this one dam flooded about 290,000 acres.
Mr. Harrell, they need to do up in the northern parts of the country that their their potential to pass flood 100 years ago was based upon an Atchafalaya Basin, which is almost 1 million acres, that in some places was 100 to 120 feet deep.
Right.
And now in those areas that historically were so deep, they're elevated to where they're heels sticking out of the water at the majority of the time during the
Yeah.
year. You know, that's how much it has sanded up or has been filled by dredging practices, by pipeline companies, by oil and gas canals.
Reduced flows.
Reduced flows,
Yeah.
diversion of sediment, you know, the agreement between the hydroelectric plant and the Corps of Engineers, the operating agreement is that the Corps allowed the hydroelectric plant to be put in as long as they would try to achieve passing 65% of the Mississippi's load of sediment, to the point of even building a catch wall
That's
to
right.
capture that flow, to make that sediment go into the Atchafalaya River.
So
You
it
know-
wouldn't fill up the Mississippi, so
Right.
to keep the ships going.
So that it's a big charade going on, you know, because over the years, you know, there was the Atchafalaya Basin program, and they were talking about spending all that money to improve water quality. And if you're gonna pass all of the Mississippi sediment into the Atchafalaya Basin, you're trying to build landmass. You're not trying to make an area that you need to be dependent upon good water quality, you know, because all of the area that you're trying to improve water quality in, you're filling it up with sand and sediment.
Yeah, and the river through Morgan City is standing up,
Yeah,
is it? Around Horseshoe Bend, it's only 6 feet deep, and the area around American Pass is only around 10 feet deep. They're having a tough time getting barges up right now as we speak.
I know this because Mr. Harold told me over the years, and I believe it to be true because I know that was the design of the Whiskey Bay Pilot Channel. The Whiskey Bay Pilot Channel, when it was dug, was dredged 1,000 feet wide by 100 feet deep. Mr. Harold said they call it the 100,000-foot channel.
Yeah,
There's no way, nowhere in the Whiskey Bay Pilot Channel that I believe you can travel in a boat and do depth soundings and that you're gonna find 100-foot depth
No.
anywhere in the
No.
Whiskey Bay Pilot
you
Channel.
know, about the deepest you get is about 80.
Yeah.
And when you pass 6 Mile Lake, it's 8 or 10 or 12 feet.
So you no longer have the potential, or not the potential, the ability to pass the flood that you could potentially pass
That's right.
60, 80, 100 years ago.
And the levees right on the east side above Morgan City, the design height is 28 feet and the levees are 12.
Yeah.
And then they got about a 10-foot wall on it. But when the water would go over that wall, you'd have a waterfall on this steel sheet piling, which would collapse it in hours. They already know that would happen. As long as the water doesn't go over the wall, it's okay. But if it goes over, you got a giant waterfall and would compromise that sheet piling. So that would flood everything from Morgan City to New Orleans. That whole area, it would put Interstate 10 about 7 or 8 feet of water on it, and should that collapse on the east side. And
You
it
know-
would put Highway 90 under, put the railroad under. All of that is a potential of happening. You don't have enough channel capacity in the river to pass the project flood, so the levees will be challenged if the channel is not there.
About 2 months ago, we set up a trip with the new colonel of the Corps of Engineers. I think his name's Colonel Jones. And he was in my boat. I took him in my boat. We took him to the Buffalo Cove area. And we wanted to show him Buffalo Cove used to be a big, huge lake that the old timers talk about. And I remember from when I was younger. You didn't want to try to navigate across Buffalo Cove during low water, during a foggy morning or a foggy day, because you'd get lost in it. It was such a big lake. Now it's just a ditch, and it's nothing but a bunch of hills with willow trees.
Right.
And we took him there, and we showed him, and we educated him. He didn't have a clue that the basin has filled in to the point of what we took him out there and showed him. And we told him, Colonel, this is just a little slither of the Atchafalaya Basin. The Atchafalaya Basin is like this all across the Atchafalaya Basin. And he was like pretty much in a maze. And I said, Colonel, don't just take my word for what I'm telling you. I said, go back and research what I'm telling you. I said, look at LiDAR technology. Look at historical data. Look at the range line readings from all of the range lines that were cut across the Atchafalaya Basin. I said, educate yourself. And I said, please do this for me, sir. when it's time for them to replace you in 2 or 3 years, I said, educate the colonel who's gonna be taking your place, so we don't have to keep on educating the next colonel who comes in. Cause they're not educating the people with the Corps of Engineers about what's going on out there, you know? So
Yeah.
we're trying to do our best.
It's an environmental disaster, because what it was before they did all that dredging was a fabulous paradise.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Fishing paradise. We're getting closer to that. Jody, thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us and raising the red flags of warning about the crawfish season might be in trouble, and so.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm gonna tell y'all something about me. You know, I'm all about the truth. Nobody pays me to come on Mr. Harrell's program. Nobody pays me when I take the colonel out in the basin, or when I take the CPRA people, or all of the different people, to show them how the problem that we have with water flow in the basin. I do that all on my dollar. And I do it because I love my state. I love St. Martin Parish. I love our culture. I love what we're about. I'm proud of where I'm from. I'm proud that I'm from the town of Henderson. I'm proud that I can go and catch and hunt and kill me something to eat and bring something back to take care of my family. I'm proud of all of that. And it's important that we continue to educate those that are coming out of school that don't have a clue about what's going on in our environment.
So thank you, Jody, so much. That brings us to the end, I believe. So thank you so much for your passion for preserving our paradise, our sportsman's paradise.
You're welcome, Mr. Harlan. I'm happy to come on anytime you want me to.
Thank you.